Okay, let's talk about this quote that I've written on the board here. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Have you heard that before? It sounds familiar a little bit. Does anybody know where it comes from? This quote actually continues after that part, but that's the part that we care about today. Anybody know where this comes from? Let's think about the possibilities. What could you guess?
Somebody old, famous, and wise.
Old, famous, and wise? Yeah, you're probably right about that. Definitely old, famous, and wise. We're not sure exactly which one of those old, famous, and wise guys wrote this, but there was a group of them that put it together. It's not from the Bible. It's not that old. This is actually from the Declaration of Independence. I'll give you, I know this is not history class, and you're wondering right now why I'm talking about history. And I should specify that this is the American Declaration of Independence, because many other countries have declared their independence at different times in history. But this is specifically from the American Declaration of Independence, which was probably the most important one in terms of its influence on world history. So what does it mean to declare independence?
Need anybody else?
You don't need anybody else? Yeah, it's saying you're not the boss of me, right? You can't tell me what to do. So the founding fathers, as they're called, of the United States, were declaring that they are no longer part of the British Empire. They no longer belong to England. Right? That's what they're saying. So they're declaring themselves to be an independent country, Jim Jam.
So Toby was not in class.
Good. The Declaration of Independence was in what year? But this is a pretty big one. 1776.
I knew it was 76, I just thought it was 1800s.
1776, Confederation. So, now we've established where it came from. What are they talking about? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. What does that mean? Why did they feel it was necessary to say that? This is the second sentence of the Declaration of Independence is, a longer page of writing. This is the second sentence of the whole thing. Why did they feel it was necessary to say this? What is the point of this?
Equality.
Equality? Yeah, they're sort of setting out the values. So what comes after this is the line you may have heard before about inalienable rights to liberty, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Right? That's the sort of stuff that comes in here. So what they're doing is they're setting out, these are our values. Right? This is what is important to us as a country. Are you with me so far? So equality is an important concept to them. That's one of their core values, we could say. That's more of a 21st century way of speaking, core values, but we could say it applies. So all men are created equal. So equality is a value. Anything strike you as a little bit I don't know, odd about that, particularly with regard to the United States in 1776?
They seem to like having slaves as well.
Yeah, some of the guys who wrote this, some of the guys who wrote the Declaration of Independence owned slaves. So that doesn't seem like equality to me. Maybe they had a different notion of equality. We can't really know exactly what they thought, I suppose. Maybe they had a different notion of equality, but owning slaves doesn't seem to jive with all men are created equal. You guys are with me on that, right? So that's just a little bit, I don't know, a little bit of hypocrisy there, I suppose, or an awful lot of hypocrisy. What else sticks out to you in particular about this, Courtney?
Well, I was also thinking for that year also, are they talking about men or are they talking about humans?
Exactly. Are they talking about men or do they mean people? Well, I'm going to suggest here, when we think about equality, we would think about it as meaning people being equal, not just like people with a particular set of reproductive equipment, if you pick up what I'm laying down, right? So if people are all equal, then okay, that's cool, I get that. But they specifically said men, and maybe that's just old-timey way of talking. They meant like mankind or something like that, but not really. Because who could vote? Only men. Only men of a certain age, and only white men. Indigenous people couldn't vote. Black people couldn't vote. Women couldn't vote. So I can vote. None of the rest of you guys can. You guys will be able to in a few years. You're going to have to wait 100 and some odd years for that. Sorry, Courtney. So, problematic here twice already. Anything else bug you or stick out to you about this? I've got a couple more things. One is, what does this mean, self-evident?
Obvious.
It means obvious, yeah. This is obvious. So self-evident is that the sun exists, the sky is blue most of the time, not particularly blue right now. Right? Those are the sorts of things that are self-evident. Self-evident means it doesn't need proving, it doesn't need discussing, it's just obvious right there on the surface. But if that's true, why do you need to say it? It is obviously not obvious, if you'll forgive my indulging on that. It is obviously not obvious, or you didn't need to say so. You follow me, Logan? It's not self-evident, especially considering that you own slaves and you're excluding specifically half of the human race by saying men. So, not self-evident at all, but that's your way of saying, we don't need to prove this, we're just laying it out and saying, this is what we believe, this is our sort of foundational belief. This is what we're going to build our nation on. So, okay, fair enough. And we could say that the notion of equality has evolved to be more inclusive, maybe more equal since 1776, and that's probably a good thing too. One more thing bothers me in here, and it's the word created. What is the word created doing there? What is the purpose? Why do you need the word at all? That all men are equal.
In their opinion, all men weren't equal. It was.
Yes, all men are certainly not equal. And so they don't want to state that because that would be directly contradictory to owning slaves, among other things. So we can say that all men are equal, but if we say created, then that leaves us some wiggle room. So at some point in, when God implanted a soul in you, at whatever point that happens, then everyone was equal. But then you're actually born, and it turns out that you're the son of a billionaire, or you're not. You're a woman, or you are the child of slaves, or whatever. And then we don't have to pretend that you're equal anymore. So yeah, this part bothers me because it's almost like they're backing off. They're saying created equal, but then then you're actually born, and then you're not equal anymore, and that's out of our control. Right? Now, anybody want to respond to that? How equal can we be? Are you and I equal, Patrick? Yeah? In what way are we equal?
I don't know. We're both people.
We're both people. Okay, that's fair. Can you do the same things that I can do?
Potentially some of them, probably not all.
Potentially some of them, probably not all of them. Yeah. Because I can vote and you can't, for example. Do we have access to the same choices?
Probably some of them.
Probably some of them, yeah, and that's as far as we could really commit to that, right? Definitely not all of them. Here's where I think they were going with this. Are we disallowed or prevented by law from doing the same things, Patrick and I? The law prevents me from killing people the same way that it prevents him from killing people. Maybe I shouldn't say that it prevents, because it clearly doesn't prevent people from killing each other. They still do it. But the law equally forbids me and everyone else from killing people or on any of the other things that the law forbids. Right? So that makes sense. Yes? Okay, so why would they have to say that? Why would, specifically in 1776, as they're declaring independence from England, it be important that they say that everyone is equal, at least in terms of the law? What are they saying? Who in England is not equal to everyone else? The Queen, or it would have been the King at the time, King George the whatever. He's not equal. He's a freaking king. That's the very definition of not equal. You have noble classes. So this is in England, in most of Europe for the last couple of thousand years. You have had people who are peasants and people who are nobility, right? Variations on what they would have called the feudal system in like grade 8 social studies or whatever. So the idea was maybe Catholic priests answered to different laws, dukes and duchesses and kings and princes and so on answered to different laws than other people. The law did not apply equally to everyone. And some people got to just outright declare what the law was, like kings and so on. Now, if you were a peasant in the feudal system, right, you worked for, on a farm, most likely, or a plantation or whatever, for some local lord who's a, baron or earl or duke or whatever. What are your prospects and the prospects for your children? Can you get rich? Can they get rich? Can you improve your lives really at all? No, and that's why people came to North America in the first place, right? Because they didn't have any prospects for their lives to get better. So this is connected to the idea of the American dream. You've heard that term before, right? So the idea being that in America, maybe to a lesser extent in Canada, everyone has an opportunity to make their lives better, to make the lives of their children and their descendants better. Got me? So that is what they're getting at here. That's what they're getting at. So even though we acknowledge that there's some hypocrisy built into there with the men-only business and the slave-owning business, they are still on the path to, we don't have kings here, we don't have people to whom the law applies differently. We have equality for everyone in the legal sense. So we all agreed that this is, this legal equality is a good thing. Courtney, you're thinking about it? You're over it?
I'm a little bit zoned out.
All right, fair enough. To what extent is equality a good thing? Is there a point at which it's not a good thing anymore? How equal should we be? Because as we've discussed, Patrick and I are not fully equal right now. Not really possible for us to be completely equal, but there's always more equality that's possible than what we have. Yeah, buddy.
Equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome.
Equality of opportunity and not equality of outcome. Now, I like that a lot. I like that a lot. That is because we don't have equality of abilities.
That sounded like Shakespeare.
That was deep, man. I might use that. So, do all of us have the opportunity to, let's say, go to university? We all have that equal opportunity. Now, any of you happen to be billionaires, or your parents? You wouldn't.
Yes, my parents are billionaires and I'm stuck in public school.
Yeah, exactly. So you wouldn't be here in public school. So what I'm getting at with this is, well, what do you think I'm getting at with this?
Richer people are more, they have more rights.
They can do everything we do, but we can't do everything they do.
Yeah, we don't necessarily have all the same opportunities. Now, in theory, we can all go to university.
In theory.
In theory. Now, before we even debate academic abilities and, IQ and all that sort of thing, we don't even need to get into that, but just about how much does it cost to go to university? Now, for somebody who comes from a very poor family, how is it possible for them to go to university?
You have to be really, really, really smart.
Yeah, they have to be really, really smart and get scholarships, or else what?
Or you go into debt.
Or you go into debt. Now, if I am the child of billionaire parents or even millionaire parents, what does it cost me to go to university? Nothing. Nothing at all. It costs my parents some money, but it doesn't cost me anything. Now, let's say that your university tuition is $10,000, just to just to keep it a round number. It'll be more than that, but just to make it a round number. So if you do a 4-year university degree, that rich kid his parents pay $40,000, 4 times 10, right? They pay $40,000, that's it. That kid goes to university and gets his or her degree if they manage not to flunk out in the meantime. Now, okay, what about me? My parents don't have $10,000 every year lying around just in case I want to go to university. Lots of people's parents don't. I would suggest have an extra $10,000 lying around. So, and even less likely $20,000, which would be closer to a realistic sort of tuition, again, depending on the school, the university you go to. But if your parents don't have that $10,000 lying around, then you take out student loans. You go into debt, right? So now your university education costs you $40,000 plus the interest on $40,000. And assuming that you don't suddenly have $40,000 at the end of university, and I will guarantee you that you do not, then you're going to be paying that off for 5, 10, 15 years. And over the amount of that time, you're going to end up paying probably more like $80,000. Now this is assuming that your parents live in the same city as the university that you're going to go to, and you're able to live with them, and that they're able to provide you with transportation and food, so you don't have any further expenses. If, however, you are like me and your parents did not live in a town or city that has a university, and they can't provide you with transportation, you also need, in your student loans, to borrow enough money for your food, your bus pass, and your rent for those 4 years. Now we're talking about at least twice as much money. And so the rich kid comes out of university with that same degree as me, owing nothing. I come out of university owing $100,000. Because I was poorer in the first place, it cost me more. Not so much equality in that. So can we fix that? Can we make that more equal? You guys aren't like feeling a lot of sympathy for me right now, and that's fine. You don't need to. I have managed to pay off my student loans, for the record. But is there a way we can make that more equal for everybody?
Logically, yes, you can split it up, but humans are greedy, so no.
Yes, well, humans are greedy, so no. That's kind of the bottom line, isn't it? What we could do, if we really wanted to promote this equality, or if the United States really wanted to promote this equality that they say they want to, then they could make university free for everyone. Depending on your qualifications, your ability to go there, then it could be free for everyone. Then there's not really any advantages. Still the advantages of, just being rich, but that would be more equal. So there are always ways to make things more equal. We're not always willing to do those things, but if you really think about it, there's no reason that the public school that we're in right now should be free, but in 2 years you're going to a different school and it's not free anymore. There's no reason that couldn't be paid for by the government as well. People pay taxes already, right? So that's just not a priority that our governments have set. Other governments in other countries in the world do have free university. So that's something that could happen. But it's a matter of how far do we want to dedicate ourselves to this idea of equality. So what would happen if we tried to make everyone equal, not just in economic and legal ways, but if we tried to make everyone physically equal? You know, we'll try to make Jim Jam taller. And shots fired, hey buddy. And so everyone is just as strong and just as tall and just as smart and all of that as everybody else. Everyone is just as equal as everyone else, right? And generally we think that this is a good thing. People who are, you know, lose a hand in an accident or whatever can get a prosthetic one that makes them more equal to everyone else. They're less disadvantaged, we could say. And this is generally, no one disputes that this is a good thing, right? So the story that we are going to read, this is a long build up to this story, the story is called Harrison Bergeron, written by a famous author named Kurt Vonnegut. And in Harrison Bergeron, we see the United States in the distant future. I think the year is 2081 or something like that. The story was written, I think, in the 1960s or 70s, so it was even more distant to them at the time than it is to us now. And it is, you okay, Jim Jam? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a very short story. I think it's only about 5 pages. And the idea is, what happens if we take this idea of making everyone equal to its extreme? And the idea is, you know, it's the year 2081 or whatever it is, something like that, and finally everyone is equal. And this is what it looks like. So keep these things and what we talked about in mind. Read the story. There's a few questions to answer at the end of it.